So I'm going to take this from a bit of a macro perspective. So here, like, they aren't ranked necessarily high for total defense. They're 63rd in the nation for total defense, and they're 100th in the FBS for run defense. So they, even though they are still continuing to improve with the turnovers on that side of the ball, they do need to improve as a whole, especially in the run game. They are a very opportunistic defense. They will make you pay through the air. But I seriously think that they could touch up a little bit on the run defense. Sometimes when they do get the ball there, it looks like the parting of the Red Sea on that side of the ball. But one thing that I want to take away from last week in particular, the game against Oregon State, this is an area of the ball that a lot of people will consider the weakest link of USC. And I think that the defense had to carry this team for very long stretches of this game, as we saw with the final score. And I think that's super promising looking forward for this. That improves the culture, that improves the confidence, the morale boost of this defense. So
100%. I think Stefan.
That's kind of what you're saying.
Stefan,
what do you think?
So I do think that there is definitely a potential for them to make the playoff. Do I think they can win the national championship? I'm not entirely sure, and here's why. No matter how good this offense is, they need to continue to improve that defense. And here's an interesting fact. Since the BCS era, there have been only 2 teams in college football who have won a national championship that did not have a top 25 defense. So I think it was the 2010 Auburn Tigers and the 2019 LSU Tigers. So it is quite the standard to live up to there.
Yeah.
But look, the perfect example here is Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma team and Ryan Day's Ohio State team. These offenses have been elite, like national championship title contender offenses. And USC is the same here. But that defense, there's no doubt that they need to have that solidified. And I think that, you know, you can't make every game a track meet. And once again, that was evident this past week against Oregon State. But yes, they definitely have the potential to win a national championship.
You mentioned that 2019 offense. I believe you're taking the Yankee here, right?
You have some great points there, Reagan.
I appreciate
and let
that.
me just put it this way. This is one of the great MVP races of baseball that we've seen. And personally, I think they should just cut this award in half and maybe give it to
Boo.
But
That's not what sports is about.
nah, here we go. Here's the curveball here. Judge is on the verge of breaking a 61-year-old home run record for a single season in the AL. And on top of that, he's on the verge of a triple crown as we speak. Look, people like to make the case that because he's at Yankee Stadium, that short porch in right field, it's easier for him to hit home runs. Well, guess what? He has a higher slugging percentage on the road than he does at home. So he's performing better and hitting more home runs on the road than he is when he's at Yankee Stadium. I think one of the things that we're also taking into effect here is recency bias. Like, this award measures player value throughout the entire season, not just one moment in time. I think we're kind of neglecting the hot start that the Yankees and Aaron Judge had this year. And yes, their record since the All-Star break is abysmal, and it's comparable to that of the Angels right now. But here's a very interesting fact here. Judge's WAR, wins above replacement rating, is nearly a 10.5. The Blue Jays sit 9.5 games behind the Yankees. He has directly contributed to the Yankees winning their division and getting into the playoffs. Ohtani, on the other hand, his defensive WAR rating is actually in the negatives, and the Angels sit nearly 34 games behind the Astros. So, look, I'm not here to bash Ohtani. He's a one-of-one type talent. Generational, do not get me wrong, but in terms of the value that they bring, the difference here is the Yankees are in the playoffs and the Angels are on the couch.
You know, Stefan, you did mention it briefly.
I'm going to go with Tom Brady here, and it's disappointing because when he came back, I think we all kind of had this expectation that he was going to pick up right where he left off, and his interview in August kind of took us back. I've never seen him this vulnerable to the media before. He's saying he's got unique challenges in his life. He's 45. I got a lot going on. Like, it's something is definitely up. I've never heard him talk like that before.
He needs to retire.
You know, when stuff happens in the home, it's hard to not take it onto the field. But when you're the GOAT like that, I mean, Daniel Hackett and Russell Wilson clearly have some time management and scoring issues, while Josh McDaniels and the Raiders are staring down the barrel of an 0-4 start. Once again, guys, who are you more disappointed with?
I'm going to go Nate Hackett here, and here's why. Broncos fans were ecstatic when they got him. Listen, he's one of the NFL's youngest coaches. He comes from the Matt LaFleur coaching tree. He got Aaron Rodgers back-to-back MVP awards. He was considered this offensive guru that was going to fix all their problems on that side of the ball. Through 3 games, he's averaging around 14 points a game. And he's got a star-studded offense. Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Javonte Williams. Like, they haven't even faced any formidable opponents yet either. Seattle, Houston, San Francisco. They still have to play their entire division twice. I'd be losing it if I had to play the Chargers, Kansas City, and Vegas twice still.
Broncos fans may be hoping they don't have Stefan. What do you
So
think?
I actually do have Austin Eckler on my fantasy team, so this is maybe why this argument is heightened for me. Look, the Chargers' depth at running back was questioned all offseason, but at the end of the day, they could always fall back on Austin Eckler. But guess what? 32 attempts, 80 rushing yards, 2.5 yards a carry. Last week, 5 yards against Jacksonville. That's abysmal. I expected an encore of 20 touchdowns this season, but given the firepower of this offense, I expected that as well. But I'm going to have to draw back those expectations big time.
Going to the Big Ten, the right decision for USC?
I will kick this off right here. There's a lot to unpack here, and at the end of the day, I'd say yes. And I think the Pac-12 will fall apart pretty soon, but that's a different argument right there. But look, the SC brand dominates the West Coast. The exposure to these other parts of the country is going to be hugely beneficial for USC, and I'll tell you why. So let's start off with this. Big Ten teams are slated to make an estimated $75 million annually with the new TV contract. USC joining in on that as well. So I want to take a case study here with Alabama, and because USC stock is rising with Lincoln Riley at the helm and everything like that. Yes, I do think football was more or less the biggest thing that was taken into consideration here. But look, in 2007 when Saban was hired, 23,000 students were enrolled at the University of Alabama. Today, there's nearly 40,000, and more than half of those students are coming from out of the state. So this is not only benefiting from an athletic, but an academic standpoint. Like, why are all these kids from out of state flocking to Tuscaloosa, Alabama? And it's because Bama's football team made it cool to go there. And it's also a revenue generator as well. In 2010, Alabama was generating $338 million, and now they're generating over $800 million in revenue. This is a huge benefit.
Stefan, you're absolutely right. Money talks. The bid after USC joined the Big Ten, they actually got a $7 billion media right. Scholarly response for anyone who's ever been asked, why are you watching football? But tremendous words. Stefan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that was brilliantly put there, Reagan. That was amazing. I understand the stigma around football being toughness and no pain, no gain, but like in this situation with Tua in particular, did anybody take into consideration what would have happened if he got his head hit twice within a 4-day span? I don't know if anybody on the staff or the medical team did in this regard. And I understand the organization and the teams and the fans, they want their guys back as soon as possible, but at what cost, like you had mentioned. And look, no part of the human body is truly primed to play football at the end of the day, like especially the human head over anything. And stay with me on the story here. I took a defensive driving course this past weekend, and one of the pieces of information is impact to the skull can negatively alter the circulation of spinal fluid to the brain, which I don't think is news to anybody in particular, but there was a specific story that one of the doctors explained in how one of their patients suffered a brain hemorrhage from a 7-mile-an-hour car crash. Just 7 miles an hour. A lot of these guys in the NFL, they run faster than that, and they're getting hit. Yeah, so just imagine the potential damage from somebody in the NFL hitting with that.
It's crazy, and unfortunately, the Trojan standard, the school has history and success. But is this the best USC sports have been?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I will give you a plethora of rankings, nationally speaking. Number 6 football team in the country, check. Heisman candidate quarterback, check. We got Croy Bethune on our women's soccer team, a Herman Trophy watch list player, check. Number 8 women's soccer team in the country, obviously the unfortunate loss to Arizona yesterday. Still check a top 25 team right there. Number 6 men's volleyball team. Number 5 men's water polo according to CWPA rankings. The women's volleyball team is tied for the most wins in Pac-12 at the moment. And in the 2020 or 2021 Summer Olympics, however you want to dub it, 66 Trojan athletes, a dozen of those were current students. And I haven't even scratched the surface of track and field yet. We have juggernauts of program. We breed athletes. USC, your alumni, fans, you guys should be proud of the athletic success across every sport from this institution right now. And now is the time to be a USC Trojan. It's honestly never been better. And, we breed athletes here. And for those of you future collegiate athletes maybe considering us or that irrelevant school on the west side of town, look no further than here. It is a great time to be a Trojan.
I mean, guys, what are your takeaways from the shocking scandal that the press has so appropriately dubbed Watergate?
These guys are awful cheaters. That's all I'm going to say. Reagan, you and I were looking up some of this yesterday. Some of those other fishermen that were going on there, they were scaling their fish 5 pounds, 6 pounds, 7 pounds. These guys go up there and it's 33 pounds for a single fish. That is insane. Yeah.
I'll say this. With the article that you had showed me, one of the other fishermen, they saw the fish that he had, and he says, check the stomach on that thing. There's no way it's 33 pounds. That's my new favorite phrase. Anytime something doesn't add up, I'm saying check the stomach on that.
Check the stomach on that.
Yeah.
So I certainly think it is still possible for them to make the playoff. And look, USC has one ranked team left on their schedule, and it's a huge one in UCLA, which, by the way, we need to be rooting hard for UCLA to handle Oregon this weekend and all their games until November 19th. And here's why. If USC can hold their own for the last 4 conference games, they go into the Rose Bowl at that time, go in and beat UCLA. Following week, put away Notre Dame in a convincing fashion, then it could potentially set up a UCLA-Utah rematch in the Pac-12 championship game. Should they make it, or against Oregon, but I think playing Utah or UCLA again would really be something that the committee values over a win against Oregon. And, unfortunately, even with these pieces needing to be in place, kind of going against the point that I just made here, but the USC is going to need the committee to do something they've never done, and that's value the Pac-12. And
it's hard to do.
It is hard to do. And this year though, it is a really competitive conference, and I think that they are paying attention to and respecting the Pac-12 more than they have in years past. But
unfortunately, there's also this conference called the SEC. And at this moment, it could be Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. All those teams could finish the regular season with one loss. And we already know how much the committee values the SEC. Then Ohio State and Michigan in the Big Ten. Then Clemson bulldozing the ACC. TCU quietly surging in the Big 12. Like, look, there are a lot of things, a lot of outside things that need to happen, but if USC can control their controllables, if they can win out the rest of the season, they at least set themselves up to be in final consideration, I think, for that 4th spot. I do think that the path is still there, and Lincoln Riley sounds awfully optimistic about it as well.
You know, I've never actually considered rooting for the Bruins, but you've made it.
Might have to.
If it helps USC be man. Oh, you're a betting favorite. Stefan, what do you think?
Let me spice it up a little bit here. Sure. Give me Blake Corum, man. Give me Blake Corum. Mom and Dad, I'm sorry. I know you guys went to Ohio State and everything. I got to go Blake Corum here. Look, he sits 4th in the Heisman betting odds, and his stock is just rising. He's got the 2nd most rushing yards in the country. He leads the nation in rushing touchdowns, and this is impressive given the fact that he's carried the ball nearly 50 times less than the leading rusher in FBS. And, like, obviously you need the individual stats to be able to be even in consideration for the Heisman Trophy. But you also need to have a pretty good team, right? Like, dare I say, I don't know, a playoff caliber team. At this very moment, Michigan sits at the top of the Big Ten Conference, and they're also, I don't know, 4th in the AP poll right now. Like, they are the statistical leaders for the conference on the ground. They also lead my apologies, they're top 10 in the country in rushing yards as well, overall rushing yards. And that's like right up there with those military academies that pump the ball out like 70, 80 times a day. And like, also, they absolutely battered a top 10 Penn State team last weekend, and Corum ran all over them for a $166 and 2 touchdowns. Like, quarterback J.J. McCarthy hasn't really had to take anything into his own hands, and that's because Blake Corum's been that field general for the Wolverines. And week by week, he continues to step up. And look, they have a big game against Michigan State this weekend for whatever it's worth. Like, they've lost the last 2 times versus them. If they can win there, they can handle their business, go into Columbus, beat Ohio State again, win the Big Ten title again, make the playoff again on the shoulders of Blake Corum. It's his to lose, man.
Well, you know, you mentioned the Heisman betting odds. See in LA. Stefan?
I'm going to feed off of everything you just said, Chris, because that's brilliantly put right there. And so Dodgers president of operations, Andrew Friedman, on Tuesday, he spoke with the media about this devastating just upset in the NLDS. And he really kind of didn't even take blame for what happened in terms of the organization. He really just attributed things to just being an unfortunate stroke of luck for the Dodgers, and the Padres were just in the right place at the right time. He kept trickling back on the regular season, how dominant it was. And, you know, for me, I don't think it's really like a personnel change that needs to be done here. They've got a lot of MVP caliber players on their team, homegrown talent, and they've got one of the best farm systems in the majors. Like, I think if anything, it just needs to be a culture change with this organization. And obviously playing in LA, there's that kind of entitlement, that kind of feeling that comes with it, and the clout that carries with it. But look, I think definitely maybe just dropping a little bit of that entitlement and getting a little more blue collar with it. But also, you know, one of the things that we can attribute to is they had such a dominant regular season. I don't really think they had any adversity come their way. And they dominated the Padres all regular season long. So going into it, I'm sure after taking game 1, they were like, whatever. We don't need to really just take these guys that serious. Like you said, little brother, that Teflon just wasn't there with this team. And so I think it's really just, you know, a motivational thing, a culture change with it.
So nobody 3-1. Guys, can the Drake curse ever be broken?
No, it is like insane how effective the Drake curse is. Look, and you mentioned 2019, Game 7 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. This man wore Philadelphia 76ers shorts, and Toronto moved on. Like, it will never go away. I also saw him wearing an Arsenal jersey last week, and Arsenal sits at the top of the English Premier League right now. It's bad things to come. Bad things to come, man.
You know, it's funny, you mentioned that 76ers. That's the game they lost with Kawhi falling down, right? Yep. Very last minute.
Yep, the shot.
Wow.
Now,
Around him, this gives him pretty good support.
Yeah, I mean, I completely second everything that you're saying there. Debo and CMC is a deadly combination. I don't think it matters who the quarterback is at this point. And look, yes, Christian McCaffrey makes any offense explosive, and he's one of the most electric running backs in the league and probably that the NFL has ever seen. But it's when he's healthy. And I know that running back health is one that is a very like short-term type of thing. Running backs don't really have that long of a career, but look, there's this stats company that calculated it was like his injuries throughout his NFL career, and they created this formula for the likelihood that he gets injured this season in particular.
I don't like this.
Analytics. What is this? Analytics. We're doing analytics for injuries now.
This is asking to jinx it.
I'm
too.
so sorry. Like, look, it's just.
I love the thought of it, and I really do hope he stays healthy. But we've seen the history, and look, he's had 6 healthy starts so far, but it almost made people forget that he sat out the last 2 years because of injury. I hope he stays healthy, and I think if he does stay healthy, this not only shoots them right to the top of the NFC West. Right now it's tied up, but I mean, look, Super Bowl contenders at this point. So
Yeah, so
They're going to have some pretty successful years.
I think short term and long term it's going to work in their favor. I know Jimmy G is not the most ideal candidate for a lot of these San Francisco fans, but look, you got to the Super Bowl with him in the past. Adding Christian McCaffrey to it with a healthy squad right now, with the exception of Trey Lance, of course, the ceiling is the roof.
Sure. Say, Trey Lance going to give up number 5 by any shot? Or no? Can the Warriors sustain their dominance, not in the boxing ring, but on the hardwood?
Yes, I can. And the reason is because even after they had a lot of players leave this offseason, they've reloaded, man. Listen to this. Gary Payton II, Damian Lee, JTA, Nemanja, Otto Porter Jr., all those guys left this offseason. They bring in veteran big man JaMychal Green, who I think is actually an upgrade from Otto Porter Jr., and Dante DiVincenzo, who's been proven to be a really good secondary scorer in the NBA thus far. James Wiseman, Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody. This is a huge year for the 3 of them, and they're going to have to be astronomically huge contributors for the success of the Warriors this year. And Steve Kerr mentioned in a press conference before the season started that the depth and the blend of experience and talent and youthfulness on this team reminds him of the 2014-2015 championship side. So I think, if they can stay healthy, as with anything in any sport, health is a huge thing. But also, in the long term, finances may come into play here. But for this season in particular, I don't see any team that can stop them in a 7-game series.
I would agree in respect of all time.
It's a very good point that you make there. And I think the word generational gets thrown around a lot.
Does.
We've seen a lot of these players come in and they are generational talents. It feels like every year there's a generational talent coming in. But for me, it's somebody who can completely alter the way in which not only the players of the game, but even spectators just even think about and approach the game. And with LeBron back in 2003, like you said, there was nobody who had the IQ and the physicality and the athleticism that he had going into it. And I also think it might have been a sign of the times. When we think back to it, and 1 and inner city basketball was popping. It was the cream of the crop. And LeBron was right there. Inner city basketball, St. Vincent, St. Mary High School.
They were looking for a star in the post-Jordan era as well.
Exactly. And I think, look, when we look at Victor, yes, 7'2". He's got this build that's almost like a 3 or a 4, but he plays like a 2 or a 3. And during the game 2 weeks ago when he was on NBA TV, he had some insane moves there. He was hitting dream shakes from 20 feet out. Dream shake fadeaway jumpers. I've never seen anybody do that, and let alone anybody that's 7'2". Combine the best of Giannis and combine the best of KD, and you got him. I don't know if his parents are test tubes or what, but look, I mean, NBA scouts are not looking for the next LeBron James. They're looking for the next Victor Wembanyama, and I think he has the potential to go in and completely change the way that we view the sport of basketball.